Welcome to the Bicurian podcast, where we explore and embrace the seeming contradictions of life. What actually is Bicurian, you ask?
Well, you may not necessarily have a mental concept of Bicurian, partially maybe because it's a made-up word. You embody it. What's happening right now in terms of the divisions between us is a focus on that which is different.
And lack of understanding and empathy for people's beliefs is no longer an excuse.
And it is in the differences we carry in ourselves that we find the Bicurian moment.
When you really dig into something, you're going to see some depth to it. It's not just a race thing. It's not just a conservation thing.
It's letting go of the or to make room for the and. We embrace all of you. Welcome to the Bicurian.
Welcome to the Bicurian podcast. I'm Eric.
And I'm Aisla.
And this week we have a special guest. We're going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Linda Templin. I'm the Executive Director of Ranked Choice Voting for Colorado.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited you were able to make time to talk to us today. And I would love for you to tell us just a little bit about Ranked Choice Voting for Colorado, the organization, and then also Ranked Choice Voting. What is that?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to share with people what ranked choice voting is, because it's one of those things people are not familiar with. But there's around 120 countries that use this system of voting to eliminate the spoiler effect. So the spoiler effect is when you're stuck in a position of having to vote the lesser of two evils or that sort of thing. And that voting the lesser of two evils is what has gotten us to where we are today as a country.
Agreed.
I can totally feel that. I admit last few elections have been really tough in that regard. So when Isla brought this up and gave me just a small outline of what it was, I'm still not super familiar, so I'm very excited to get into it, but I already like what you said there because I wish there was something that made me at least feel like there was an alternative to picking which thing I hated the least when ballot time came.
Right, and that's one of the things that I suspect really turns people off to elections in general. I mean, there was the city of Santa Fe that just held their first ranked choice voting election, and they saw their turnout go up by 10%.
That
just
sounds
that people
significant. Is that significant? I'm not familiar with increases, but that sounds significant to me.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And that you could get that kind of an increase out of, without having to spend extra money or have have your local election going on at the same time as a higher election. Mm-hmm. That's amazing to get more people involved in, our shared communities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So why don't we start here? For me and our listeners that have no idea other than the rough outline that I did get on this, maybe you can explain what it is and kind of where it comes from.
Oh, okay. So what it is that on the ballot, all you do is you rank your choices from your favorite to your least favorite. So you just kind of say, here's what I really want. And then here's my backup plan. So let's say you were going to get some bagels and you were in the mood for one of those raisin bagels, but they were out. Well, you wouldn't say, forget it, I'm leaving. You'd say, well, I don't know, what's the backup? Do you have the cranberry or the blueberry? But, last option would be the everything bagel because, look, I got to talk to people and I don't want to smell like garlic. It's not what I'm in the mood for breakfast. So you just kind of rank your choices like that. Well, it's very intuitive because people have backup plans. I mean, that's part of daily life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's very intuitive. It's very easy to use and people like it.
Yeah. Well, and I remember when I was working with RCV a little bit, one of the things they talked about is people use this daily now, on Amazon and Yelp. People are always, you don't rate something yes or no. You give it between 1 and 5 stars. You rank it.
Right. And it's very, it's very intuitive, so it's one of those things that we're used to being able to really have a voice to say, this is what I like. So anytime you're painted into a corner where you have to pick the lesser of two evils and get strategic about it, that turns people off to it, and people don't want to participate. I mean, I had neighbors saying to me, in 2016, it's like Claire Underwood is running against Tony Soprano. I can't, there are people who vote in every single election who couldn't vote. They just couldn't bring themselves to do it.
Yeah.
And they couldn't wrap their heads around the idea of voting for somebody who wasn't one of the main two candidates.
Well, and I do feel like this would actually help with third party as you bring that up, because it is about like the main two. But I feel like other people's voices might be heard. Right now, you've got third parties that are throwing, these candidates out there, and they're happy to get 2 or 3% of the vote, and they're constantly trying to climb high enough on the ladder to get actual support from
they go.
Financial
my understanding
support.
is they're looking for 5% because that opens them up to certain kinds of national, it puts them into the national debates, I believe. Or
and some funding things, I believe. Things. Yeah, we can pull some of that for the show notes. But I do know that like 5% is a magic number. But it seems like with this system, it might actually give some credence to some of those people that we did some show prep and we were talking about the idea of throwing away your vote. And for the most part, what I've seen is that most people want to vote third party or want to vote for something idealistic, but feel like they're going to waste their vote. And with this, you could still give a 5 out of, 5 stars to somebody and give a 4 stars to your favorite third party candidate. They'll get some notice in that ranking system, even if,
what goes that I think with RSCV, with ranked choice, the way I understand it, and you can correct me here, is if there are 3 candidates I liked, or I shouldn't say, if there were 3 candidates that were my choices, I would say that the one I like the best, even if I don't think they're as likely to win, would be my first rank. And then I would go for my backup plan, my second, and then my third. And then if that first person doesn't have the threshold to win, then my second person gets moved up to the first position so that my vote still counts. Is that sort of a good way to say it?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So what happens is that they tally up everybody's first choice. And if somebody has a majority, then they win. So that's pretty straightforward. And that happens sometimes, that you have a candidate who wins in the first round. And then what you do is you want to keep everybody viable as long as possible. So you just start from the bottom ranking, if you will, or not from, it starts from the least popular candidate is dropped. And then that candidate's ballots, those voters' next choices are counted. And and then whoever is in last place is eliminated. And it keeps going in rounds of instant runoffs until a candidate has a majority.
Got it. It sounds like a cool system. It begs the question, in a world where there seems to be voter fraud and just all of these sorts of things, are there ways that you have thought about to address some of that? Like how best to still keep it fair? Is there considerations around that?
Absolutely. Because there's nothing as awful as a great idea that's poorly rolled out. So now we have the best elections in the country here in Colorado because we're all paper ballot.
Yeah.
And so we're able to audit the results. So the Secretary of State's office has put together audit standards for ranked choice voting elections, and he's worked with the county clerks to promulgate best practices.
Wow. So one of the things that I had mentioned before we started recording, that in my reading up on this, that I found to be very interesting, I was looking at fairvote.org. They have a lot of different information about the voting systems, and they're very supportive of ranked choice. And they said that this was first suggested in the 19th century by a member of Parliament, John Stuart Mill,
Parliament in the UK, by the way.
In the UK, yeah. Who wanted to give the minority a voice in the face of their concern. The ruling class, the wealthy class, was concerned that the growing middle class would eventually have a majority and therefore displace the establishment in government. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, that it was started first by the sort of ruling class to protect their ability to continue to participate, and that it's been around since the mid-19th century, which I didn't have that information before. So I don't know if you can speak to that at all, or even just the history of it here in Colorado or America.
Sure. And it's a great concept that kind of got thwarted here in the States. But there are two variants of ranked choice voting, which is to say it's the same system. It's sort of like if you think of a bicycle, if you're riding the bike and you're only using one speed, but you're riding a 10-speed bike, is it still a 10-speed? Yes, it's still a 10-speed bike. So there's the multi-winner election, which is, let's say you have a district. And this is really the best way I could think of ranked choice voting getting rolled out, but that you have a district where there's several representatives. So it isn't a winner-take-all system. So let's say you have 3 political factions in an area and 2 of them are similar. You can still have, under winner-take-all, you can have the minority faction or the statistically minority faction win because the majority is, divided. Mm-hmm. So under ranked choice voting, it's in the multi-winner, it's best if you have an odd number of representatives who can then represent different viewpoints within the community. So that's one of the things that particularly conservatives here in the States are very interested in, is that they wouldn't have to worry so much about the gamesmanship, that they could just speak to their values and what it is they truly want. And, if they only get, their segment of the population votes for them, they still get a segment of the seats. It isn't, they're totally out of the picture electorally. For single winner, it's still, a winner take all. But one of the things it does is it prevents a extremist candidate from winning. So let's say, and I don't want to go out on a limb and pick on anybody who may be in office right now, but imagine a primary that's split between maybe 10 candidates, for a very popular and interesting office. And then you have people voting in that primary. You could have an extremist candidate winning with like 12% of the vote because everybody else is split amongst all those other candidates, while this extremist candidate wouldn't be anybody's idea of a backup plan. Right. So you'd have a more moderate candidate winning when you have to get a consensus win together. So that's one of the benefits we're seeing to ranked choice voting in places that use it, is that, extremists can still, run a candidate. They can still be heard in the debates, but they don't necessarily win office because they have alienated people.
That makes total sense. And I actually really like that. I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, I see it could change sort of the dynamic we have that drives me crazy right now, which is that essentially during the primaries, you got everybody trying to be the best Democrat and the best Republican, and they swing really hard to their left or right leanings that they would have to be. And it almost sets up this system then, once each party selects that candidate, they almost have to swing their viewpoints back to be more moderate and central, because it's no longer a popular vote amongst your far, left or right leaning party. It's now the majority popularity vote. And I feel like that just, it's very disillusioning to watch candidates have to do that. I think this does set up a system where they could run on their platform the entire time and be who they are and make it all the way to the end, final vote, and still be the person that they were when they started.
Yeah, it gets very hard to know who to vote for when they've changed their position so many times.
And then they have to. I mean, in a lot of regards, to win, I was recently hearing something confirmed that I always knew, which is that the moderate, the people in the middle is actually the largest voting group. It's, and so these candidates have to go through this process of winning their party, which is going to come down to them being the most whatever, left or right. But then, they almost have no choice, because in order to appeal to the majority of voters in a state or in the country, they have to change their position. And it's something we've just come to accept, but it's really hard to watch.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it is. And it makes the races so acrimonious, because you just have to be better than the other candidate.
Which is why they resort to attack ads, of course.
Yeah, I remember that joke, right? That I don't have to be faster than the bear. I have to be faster than my campmate, and to avoid getting eaten. And I feel a little bit like that's how our political races are going. It's not necessarily I'm trying to run fast, just trying to run faster than someone who's going to get caught by the bear. It's like, it's not a really hopeful, progressive, inspiring vision for the future, which might be why a lot of people don't want to vote.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does. There was a person who is involved in ranked choice voting who was off in Sweden, I want to say 20 years ago. And there was an election going on at the time. And he was just so surprised how pleasant it was and how it was very focused on the issues. So the candidates weren't smearing each other. They were just saying, this is what I think is a good idea for our community. And he was, just so surprised that people could act like that. Because one of the things I've learned in, studying politics and studying psychology is people behave based on the system they're in. And in this system, you have to reach out, not just to your base, but to the people in the middle and the people on whatever the other side is supposed to be. You have to talk to everybody, because you're not going to win if you only talk to your base. You need to be somebody's backup plan. Very few candidates win, in the first round. I mean, it happens, but you have to have a darn good platform to do it. So it changes the political calculus.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, didn't one state actually pass ranked choice voting as their state voting procedure in the 2016 election? I feel like that was a ray of hope that I saw. Yeah,
the state of Maine passed ranked choice voting, and they used it for the first time this summer in their primaries. So that was fantastic, and it worked exactly like it should. No surprises there. So that really is a ray of hope. And what they did is they used ranked choice voting in Portland, Maine, and then they got enough people used to how ranked choice voting works, and they had enough administrative understanding of how to, run the elections, and that, you get the software upgrade and, you run the ballots like this, and they were able to do it, and it worked perfectly. So here in Colorado, we have Telluride that uses ranked choice voting. They've done it twice. It's worked both times exactly how it's supposed to. And there are more cities that are considering it. So I get requests from cities all the time to speak to their city council members or their county clerks, or to present to the city councils. So talk to various commissions. The city of Pueblo will be having it on there as an initiative. We're in petition phase right now, and we are hoping to get on the January ballot, which sounds odd, but that's what we're going for. And they would roll it out and implement in November of 2019. Now, the League of Women Voters had said they will back us for a statewide initiative.
Wow.
If more cities than just Telluride run ranked choice voting.
Wow.
Which means if Pueblo goes, we could be set up to do it that way here in Colorado to vote on whether we do it in 2020.
That's exciting.
Wow. Yeah, that is that's cool. So this is more than just kind of a pipe dream. It sounds like it's actually getting some traction here and around the country right now.
Absolutely. And one of the things I enjoy the most is that, I talk with people all over. So I'm talking with seriously random people on the street, talking to them about ranked choice voting. And people understand it. They get it really quickly. Now I'm going to wave a graphic at you. I usually have a handbill or something I can use. So we'll be able to post that in the notes. It's easier with the handbill.
I believe it, yeah.
But, here's what your ballot looks like. Oh, yeah, I totally get that. Where do I sign? Stop talking. Okay.
Right. That makes sense.
So this doesn't sound like it's a terribly partisan kind of thing, right? I mean, most of the people you talk to are they nervous about it? They distrustful of this system, or do they buy in?
Oh, they love it. And people all over the political spectrum, which has been really encouraging for me because, I volunteered on campaigns for years and years, and I got so into the, partisan mentality that going to the other side's, conventions or events and talking to people, I was expecting, they'll be awful to me. No, they really say, this is great. This is fantastic. We hate voting for the lesser of two evils. I would like to vote my actual values and my hopes and my dreams. And I hate it when it gets ugly, and we are in this together. And yes, everybody needs to be heard. So these basic values of fairness are things we share. And so that was so surprising to me. And that's really what gets me motoring in the morning is knowing that we really have a way forward finally.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I'm curious, what do you see as like challenges and stuff? We could probably spend the next however long we're going to be recording for talking about the problems with the Electoral College and all of those people. Can this be made compatible with this system if it were to raise up even to the national level?
So for the Electoral College, we'd have to do away with it to use ranked choice voting for the presidential races in the general.
Okay.
So that's one of those, maybe in 10 years.
I can't think of too many of my friends that wouldn't be sad about that, but.
No, right? Yeah.
Like the Electoral College has become the scapegoat of all of the problems, no matter what. Like the last several elections, it's always been down to who won the popular vote, but the Electoral College messed it up, and it's gone in favor of both of the major parties at different times. So, very interesting thing to kind of think about. This could be not only a way to empower voters, but also solve that problem. From the point of view of how the Electoral College has worked or not worked, depending on what year it was.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. And can you imagine the presidential campaign being run like this?
I can. Oh, yes. So much better.
Yeah. It's like, wow, we can finally have nice things. That would be nice. So the way they have it set up in Maine is that it's for everything from the presidential primary down to the lowest state office. So that's RTD board, school board, all of that.
Gotcha. So people can actually see it working in some real elections, even if it's not all the way up to the presidential election right now.
Right. Well, I mean, and the presidential primary, that would be nice to see, run that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I feel like I heard as a suggested barrier to this was the cost to implement. And I would love to have you speak to that.
Oh, absolutely. So all of the major software manufacturers make a ranked choice voting module. Okay. So that already exists. So we're not stuck with whatever our main vendor is selling. So now ranked choice voting for Colorado is, I say, militantly nonpartisan. we're also militantly agnostic as to software vendor. You're staying well out of that one.
Okay.
So there's that, but so it's not a huge cost. And what I'd really like to see is that when we update our software in 2020, that whatever we get is has that ranked choice voting module. Because currently for Pueblo, like they're going to have to buy that module. Now they're going to save more than that amount of money on not having runoffs. Right. So for some places, it saves money. Like in Denver, they have to spend over $1 million every time they have to have a runoff.
Gotcha.
Because they have a requirement for a majority winner. So they then have a top two runoff. But this saves a lot of money and a lot of grief with the candidates having to run again a month later to raise the money for it, and then having the lower turnout. So for many places, it saves money to have ranked choice voting. For other places that aren't saving money, they're getting the benefit of increased turnout. But we want to be really mindful of not generating extra cost for instance, rural communities that are really strapped anyway. We'd prefer to see the state do this as a bulk program.
That makes sense. That if the state is going to do an update anyway, they might as well add this to their update package.
That is my hope. And the Secretary of State's office has been fantastic, really doing the work to make sure that if this is where we're going to have a successful rollout.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So this begs the question. You're obviously doing great work and you're speaking and you're doing all of this. How can our listeners help if they want to?
Gosh, okay. Well, the interweb is the thing. And so we have our website is RCV, like ranked choice voting, for FOR, Colorado.org. And we're also on the Facebook and the Twitter. But
and we'll get those links from you and post them up. So, yeah.
There it is. And so on our Get Involved page, there's a bunch of different options. If you are, for instance, running for office or you're an office holder, you can, or really anybody can endorse ranked choice voting, and we can quote you somewhere. We put on just for fun elections. To educate people on how ranked choice voting works. So we put on beer elections seem to be pretty popular. People get like a flight of beers and then you vote on which beer should go on special. And those have been working well. We have, so like the ballot design here, now I'm going to wave a thing at you, but this is the ballot design that was put together by Center for Civic Design. So this is what we can expect our ballots to look like in the future. And we have an app that then shows the tally display. So you see how it works. And it's really pretty fun. It's quick, it's easy. So you can help volunteer at one of these events or invite us to present to your groups. Can I say it doesn't have to be beer, pastries, and candies have also been pretty popular.
That's great.
Yeah, I just feel like this is something that if people learn about it, I think it could have a real serious effect on changing things. And to be honest, I've been so disillusioned since 2016 and even a little before that with the way that things have gone. I feel like this is a legitimate, option to re-empower the voters, make them feel better about their solutions, and it doesn't feel in any way like a partisan sort of thing, so it's easy to get behind. There's no agenda, no hidden agenda, and I think it would really just improve the system.
Well, I'm pretty sure our founding meeting was a Libertarian, Democrat, a Republican, a couple of Green Party members, and some independents. Like it was, and then a couple of like, I don't vote, but I'm interested in this as an option. Like, I feel like it was a very wide variety of ideologies, which is why I thought, wow, this is a great movement. It actually can bring us together politically at a time when everything feels really fractured.
And it feels hugely less just divisive than our current system right now.
Right. And it's as if we're supposed to hate each other. We're neighbors. I mean, my goodness, we have so much in common, and that we get our politics, it can get us into a mindset where, somebody or the other is the enemy or the other side, and they're absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, and it is. I mean, everybody's just on each other right now, and it's, we were having a talk, and this might come up in a future podcast, both planning for health around the holidays as well as planning for family health about not discussing politics, because I cannot think of a time that I've been alive when it would probably be more frowned upon to discuss politics over the Thanksgiving table this year. It just seems to be tearing families and friendships apart right now. So, yeah, I'm all in favor of anything that gets us back to discourse as opposed to just anger and resentment.
It's true. It is a nice that there is, something hopeful that we can work for together. And, we have this Pueblo campaign coming up. And so people can volunteer and make phone calls from the comfort of their own homes. And so that's been exciting.
That's
so
fantastic.
We'll give you those links too.
Yeah, please do. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. Really, really appreciate you talking about this.
Yeah, thank you. I've learned a lot, and I am totally in favor of this now that I know all about it. So, very seldomly do I ascribe to any hardcore beliefs on here, but this one I'm kind of behind. So,
fantastic. Well, we'll have to keep you guys in the loop for the next beer election coming up, which is why it is Tuesday, and here it is, Tuesday, October 23rd on Colfax at the Barfly at Alamo Draft House, Sloan's Lake.
Excellent. Well,
sick of election season? Come on out.
That sounds good.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
All right. You have a good night.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Bikerian Moment.
All right. So we're going to go full political. Don't turn this off for today. Ranked choice voting. And then I'm going to talk about Amendment 74. For those of you who don't live in Colorado, this may not be as interesting to you, but I promise you should still listen because it's kind of an interesting concept.
And the subject is important because, as you're going to point out, it's been proven why it failed in another state.
Actually, 2 other states. I did a minimal amount of research. However, basically, there's a ballot initiative that I just had the language for it, and I have now lost the language because that's my day today. What it does is it's called the Compensation for Reduction in Fair Market Value by Government Law or Regulation. So that's the whole amendment.
Seems pretty simple.
Yeah, it does.
So the government does something in my house or property, or something loses value. They're going to compensate me for it.
Right.
Sounds great. Sign me up. I'm going to vote yes for that.
Right. So it sounds like a really great initiative, and there's this a bunch of stuff about it that makes it really not great. One is, and I love this, the article that I got was written by a gentleman who's a lawyer, and he said, really, it's just the only people who are going to win on this is the lawyers because of all the lawsuits. He said, I'm not against lawyers because I am one. I was like, well, I guess that's fair. But really, they shouldn't get this level of advantage. So basically, what it would do is, for example, if a zoning regulation made it so that your house no longer had a view, you could then sue the government for the change in value for your property.
Right. So somebody built a building because of a zoning regulation in front of your window.
Right. And then if the person who wanted to build the building couldn't build the building because of your view, and that's a zoning regulation, they could sue the government for compensation for their loss of value. So,
right.
Do you see how that works?
So lawsuits galore.
Lawsuits galore. And so what I thought was very interesting was it said one, the owners on sort of all sides of an issue could sue for compensation.
Right.
So he's calling it a legal free-for-all. He said that there were 2 states that had passed this or a measure similar to this. Oregon reported over 7,000 claims filed against the state, totaling $19.5 billion after passage of its law. The voters called a mulligan and repealed it just 3 years later. Arizona passed a much more narrow version of Amendment 74, and they quickly saw property owners fighting other property owners in court. Most of the towns now routinely grant zoning waivers as a way to avoid these inevitable lawsuits. Both of the states mentioned, Arizona and Oregon, had several exceptions built into the law, including some that account for public health and safety. So if, you had to keep a chemical plant a certain amount away from your property, that you couldn't sue about something like that, right?
Got it.
Amendment 74 dispenses with even those protections. So public health and safety are not included as exceptions for what you could sue over, considering a loss of property from a government law or regulation. And so they were saying that, that not only has it been shown to be unsuccessful and costly in 2 other states, or not, in terms of Arizona, it wasn't as much costly as it just basically now a zoning easement is pretty much just granted regardless because they don't want the lawsuits. So that the government has even less ability to kind of regulate how a city is planned, and think about that long-term consequences. But Amendment 74 doesn't even have public safety, health and safety restrictions. So go Libertarian Colorado there.
Yeah. So what this feels like to me is one of those feel-good sort of things that shows up on a ballot, and when you read it in the little box, the short version of it, you might say, oh, hey, yeah, I'm all for that. I'm a property owner. This could benefit me someday.
Yep.
But the reality is, when you get in deeper, it may not be as positive.
That's what it looks like. And I've been reading, this is the article that I found that was in the Daily Camera. However, and I'll put it in the show notes. However, there were several different articles talking about the ways in which not only is it concerning, however, it's the 2 places that it has been implemented with more restrictions ended up being very expensive, and the Oregon ended up repealing it.
Yeah. Well, and that actually brings me to my point, which being election season and the show releasing a few days before the election, just how important it is to maybe spend some time and read your voter's guide for your local area, understand what's actually on the ballot. And most importantly, make sure you vote. I mean, this is a small amount of civic responsibility that I feel like we all have, and sometimes we take for granted. And I'm just going to sound like that guy that sits around and says, it's your power, and if you don't use it, you deserve to have it or whatever. But it's really more than that. These sorts of local bills and local things affect us way more than who's president in the long term. And we should pay attention to it. We should get out and we should vote. And it's coming up in a few days. So if you haven't voted, I would suggest double check what's on the ballot this year and try to make an educated decision when the time comes to fill in the little bubble.
Seconded. Thank you for listening. If you have ideas, feedback, thoughts, please find us on social media. We are by Curian on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or give us a call at 720-507-7309 or email podcast@bycurian.com. And if you like listening to us, please consider giving us a review on your platform of choice. That is a way that really helps us to go up in the noticeability.
Yes. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.